Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Hello and welcome to the Living Out podcast. We help people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality. And we've reached series 4 of the podcast. And in this season, we particularly want to help churches talk about faith and sexuality. How can churches be good places for those who are gay, same-sex attracted, or perhaps struggle with gender dysphoria? Ed, Anne and Andrew are here, and we're going to talk about these things together. Now, we've got quite a lot in common. We're Christians and we experience same-sex attraction, but we're from slightly different church backgrounds, and I thought it would be useful to tease that out as we start. So, Andrew, why don't we start with you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your church background and what you value about it?
Ooh, so I've been in a couple of New Frontiers churches, my main kind of church homes over the years. What have I valued about that? I think a real focus on the Word of God as the basis of what we know about God and believe in God, but also really on the Holy Spirit to be amongst us, do His work, all that kind of stuff. But also, when I was studying in Durham, I was doing theology right next to the cathedral and was a little bit involved occasionally kind of in stuff at the cathedral, and really just actually was blessed by a very different experience of an approach to particularly corporate worship, and was blessed by that. So that's given me a nice appreciation of broader kind of worship traditions and church traditions as well.
Great. And Ed, knowing your background, you must like cathedrals and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was a student at Durham as well, and I used to go to Durham Cathedral for Evensong, go to Bristol Cathedral for Evensong, love the liturgical tradition of Anglicanism. I'm a licensed lay minister in the Church of England, and I think I'm committed to the Church of England because in all its sort of foundational documents, it is Reformed and Catholic. It's really well thought through in what it cares about, what it insists upon, and what it doesn't care about and doesn't insist upon in a way that I think is really helpful. But others may disagree.
So, interesting. Anne, you have got sort of Durham connections in as much as you're from the Northeast, but do you want to tell us about your church background?
Well, I started off as a non-Christian in a quite a high Anglican church. I was actually an altar girl, so
Wow.
I quite enjoyed wearing the white robes.
Please tell me their photos in the show notes.
There might be. It was pre-digital, so I think I'm safe. But I loved processing in with candles and things like that. When I became a Christian, I was involved in quite a big Anglican church, evangelical Anglican church, and the Bible teaching there particularly was incredible and really gave me a sort of solid basis in my faith. Since then, I've kind of moved denominations a bit. I don't feel a particular denominational affiliation. So I've been in a Baptist church, a few Baptist churches, in an independent church as well. I think I think there are good things from all different church traditions. So I've come to really appreciate liturgy, but I also appreciate sort of freer kind of styles of worship, different types of music. I love old hymns and the sort of rich theological truths in them. But I love I play drums and I like playing. I like sort of modern worship stuff as well. I think there's a lot that we can learn from sort of contemplative traditions, but also, I enjoy a bit of hand waving occasionally. So, yeah.
Excellent. So we've got different backgrounds. I'm a pastor of an FIEC church. That's the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, and love being there. Love the community that I'm part of. In Oxford, love the fact that we've got a mixed age range and pretty much every age is represented somewhere along the way. But I have to be honest, one of the joys of being involved with Living Out is getting to work with a whole range of churches. I think one of my favourite days was doing something with the New Frontiers network, and they were just lovely. So we thought this would be a useful introduction to give you an idea of where we're all coming from in our different church backgrounds, and enjoying the fact that different churches are wanting to be biblically inclusive. And that's our theme for this series. How can churches be biblically inclusive? So the title of this episode is Welcome and Dignity. And what we're going to do this series is work our way through what we've called the Church Audit. It's available on the Living Out website. It's a series of 10 statements that aim to make the church biblically inclusive and welcoming. Ed, you're involved in setting that up. Why? What's it about? What are you aiming for?
Well, really encouragingly, a number of years ago, church leaders kept approaching us and asking whether we could help them become more biblically inclusive of LGBT people. And so we just thought through, how could we do that? How could we resource churches with something they could use to really think through the issues they would need to think through? So we came up with 10 questions. And the idea of these 10 questions is that a church leadership team, in whatever shape or form that is, whether it's clergy or lay, whether it's a PCC or a church council or a leadership team, whatever it is in your context, could go through and ask these questions and try and work out whether they're true or false of your church community, or whether you're not sure. And we came up with these 10 statements, and I've been really encouraged to hear how many churches have worked through them, including my own, and found out that some of these statements are, in a really encouraging way, true of them. Other statements, a bit false, or they're not sure. And people have really had to then think through, how can we change our church culture and practice to be more biblically inclusive of people like us on this podcast?
So I guess working through the statements gives people, weaknesses to work on, and then also strength to celebrate where they're doing things well. That's the aim of it. So with that in mind, let's dig in. We're going to look at 2 each episode. So the first is this: your church family meetings include people who could be labelled LGBTQI+ or same-sex attracted. So what's the thinking behind that? Why is that a good test for a church?
Yeah, I chthink church should be a place where everybody feels welcome, and that includes sexual minority groups. I think it matters because it matters to Jesus. If you look at the people that he came for, the people that he spent time with and dignified and loved, they're not perhaps the people who we'd expect. They weren't necessarily just the religious people, the Pharisees, but he kept quite surprising company, and I guess if our churches don't represent that diversity and don't have people that Jesus would hang around with and spend time with, then we're getting something wrong. After all, the gospel is for everybody. The promise of salvation and forgiveness in Christ is for everybody. Everybody should be able to come to church and feel like it's a place for them, and it's a place where they can hear the truth and come to know Jesus and his salvation.
I think we've got to recognise that often evangelical churches have been places where those from sexual minority groups don't feel welcome, and that's because, by and large, we are full of people who come across as self-righteous and proud and without sin. And I love how Tim Keller, in his book, his book Prodigal God, just points out the massive danger of that, and how we need to increasingly build churches which are full of people who are not self-righteous, but showing the need of Jesus, who are not proud but humble, and who are being open, honest about their own brokenness. And when we build churches like that, we'll find that people from sexual minorities come in, and they do come in. And I know plenty of churches where there are loads of people from sexual minorities, but because it's a church where they're made to feel included, rather than the church where they're made to feel excluded.
I guess some smaller churches, it may not be the case that there's somebody who would identify as same-sex attracted within them. But certainly once you're a larger church, if you're in a position where nobody within the congregation, and you're perhaps a church leader, has spoken to you about issues of sexuality, it might at least be worth asking the question, is this because people sense it's not a safe place to talk about that? I think that's the key issue when it comes to being welcoming. If somebody who experiences same-sex attraction, maybe they aren't public about it yet, but they come to your church, do they sense that this is going to be a good place to have conversations with people? Not necessarily everybody, but with church leaders. Is this a place where they can talk about it? That seems pretty essential to me if we want to be welcoming.
And certainly as a preacher, church leader, I'm often wanting to say, in sermons, wanting to say things like, you might have questions around your sexuality, or you might be experiencing gender dysphoria, on the basis that if you signal that that there are people with those experiences out there, oddly there will be, because they'll then come and talk to you about it. And I know that from a powerful experience I had of a preacher, talking halfway through a sermon about me, just saying halfway through a sermon, there are people out there who have questions around their sexuality, who might experience same-sex attraction. I want you to know. And it was the first time I'd ever been referred to in a sermon, and suddenly I felt included. Suddenly I felt, he knows I exist, and that was a life-changing moment for me. And so I'm trying to provide, as a church leader and a preacher, those life-changing moments for others as much as possible in saying, more subtle ways, I know you exist, and I'd be delighted if you were able to share that with me or with somebody else in the church family.
I totally agree. I remember as a teenager, with the experience of the only time gay people and same-sex attracted people were talked about was as out there. It was them out there and us in here. And I was there as a same-sex attracted Christian teenager, hadn't come out to anyone, kind of wrestling with, but apparently I should be out there, not in here, but I want to be in here. How does this kind of work? It's actually just the assumption, or laying down the assumption that, of course, we've got all manner of different life experiences within church family and church community, makes people feel welcome, feel they can share, and doesn't kind of create this tension of, apparently, because I'm this type of person, I shouldn't be here, but actually creates that sense of welcome.
And I think there are helpful things that church leaders can do to sort of set the right culture. So I've had a really encouraging experience in a church where the minister knew about my sexuality, and he would often, before he preached or did some notices, he would run stuff past me and just check how it would come across, because, it wasn't his personal experience, but he wanted to know that what he was saying was being sensitive and welcoming to LGBT people, which I found really honouring, actually. So there are people doing it really well.
There are a couple of things with my sort of pastor preacher hat on that I've tried to do. One is almost have a mantra in my mind. So occasionally you mention issues to do with sexuality because, I don't know, perhaps you're in a denomination where that's an issue at the moment, or maybe you want to talk about the ways Christians sometimes get persecuted, and you might bring sexuality into that. But I have a basic rule that whenever I mention sexuality, I want to say this: we believe everybody is welcome. We believe marriage is for a man and a woman because it speaks of the gospel message of Christ and the church. And if you've got any questions about that, please do ask us. So I almost have a rule in my mind never to mention sexuality without mentioning something of that sort of mantra, because otherwise your non-Christian wandering in thinks, well, they're regarded as a kind of political issue or a political football. Or to be honest, even your Christian thinks, well, this is an issue rather than this is about people. And so I think we've just got to find ways of using that sort of mantra so we never mention sexuality carelessly.
And the issue thing, I think, is key as well. Again, my early experience being a teenager would be same-sex sexuality spoken about as an issue, a problem, a cultural thing we must oppose, not as actually, for some of us, a discipleship issue and a real-life thing, actually. And making sure, we don't present these things purely as kind of culture war issues, but actually is just real-life, normal experiences, which then become discipleship matters for many of us, is so key as well.
And what we're not doing is suggesting that this coming Sunday you do a survey on the door where you ask people, do you associate with any of the sexual minority labels in society today? Please tick the relevant box. But I think we are saying that it probably should concern you if you're in church leadership. And actually, you look back at the last few years and you think, actually, I've never had a pastoral conversation with anybody around questions of experiences of sexuality or questions about gender, because that would begin to suggest to you that you're not leading the sort of church, you're not part of the sort of church where those things can be talked about. And that probably is an alarm bell moment. And you need to think, well, why have we become a church where these things are just not talked about? Think how much they are talked about in the world outside. Why can they not be talked about? Why are people not talking to me about them here? And that just might be a particular challenge to somebody listening in. You aren't being asked questions about this because for some reason people think that you wouldn't be up for listening or you wouldn't be able to respond in a gracious and kind way. Why is that the case? That's something for you to be thinking through.
I think there's a thing about not making assumptions as well. I mean, I've been in some sort of tricky situations because people have just made the assumption that everybody's straight. So I remember once going on a project and they were very careful to keep men and women separate. So there was a sort of boys' house and a girls' house, and I ended up having to share a bed with a really attractive girl. And, nobody had thought that might be a problem. So I think it is just, being aware that there will be... or, we want to make sure that the church is a place where people from sexual minorities are appropriately discipled, like Andrew was saying, and also not put in really inappropriate situations.
And I guess that could have been solved, didn't it, by just somebody asking you what has made you feel excluded. And so actually, if people are aware of people from sexual minority groups in their church family, to meet up for a coffee or something and say, what have we done that has unhelpfully, unbiblically made you feel excluded?
It's just about thinking, in part. It's thinking, particularly if you're a church leader, as I think about the church family in front of me, there are likely, if you've got a church of any kind of size, that there are likely to be those with experiences of same-sex attraction in front of me. I must occasionally find ways of indicating that I realise that. It's not difficult. So I think it's just including issues to do with being gay or same-sex attracted in lists of stuff. So it might be, you're here and you're experiencing suffering in various forms. Maybe you're facing bereavement. Maybe it's unemployment. Maybe you're struggling with a sexuality that you find difficult at times. Maybe it's loneliness, or I don't know. You're talking about people being given dignity, made in God's image. Maybe we doubt that because we're disabled. Maybe we doubt that because we wrestle with our sexuality. Maybe we doubt that because we don't like the way we look. Do you see what we're doing there? It's not, hey, here's my big sexuality moment, but it's just gently dropping in. I'm aware there will be people who may struggle with gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction in front of me.
And here's a guess that if your church is any bigger than about 10 people, you will have someone whose past, present, or future experience has been touched upon by these experiences. And one of the encouraging things for me is just hearing again and again how evangelical churches that are meant to be, according to some in our culture, unsafe places for people from sexual minority groups to be in, are actually safe spaces. And that's shown by the number of same-sex attracted, gay, trans people who are in churches and are finding them to be inclusive, safe spaces, to be well above the national average, well above what a lot of people expect, which encourages me that this is happening. It needs to happen more, but encourages me that it's already happening to some extent.
We're rightly talking about this in general as a thing all churches should care about. You're welcome to all people. But maybe a point to highlight as well is this is a particular point we should be thinking about if we want to reach the younger generation, which I think all of us in the UK church are rightly acutely aware of at the moment. And the reality is that kind of under 25s identifies LGBT at much higher rates than older people. The latest figures I could find recently from the ONS showed around 6.5% of 16 to 24-year-olds identifying some way as LGBT, and that's 6 times as many as older generations. So if we want to be welcoming to and good at reaching out to younger people in our nation, we need to make sure we are welcoming and inclusive of LGBT people.
So in many ways, we're saying that on statement 1, many churches are finding ways of including gay, same-sex attracted people within their congregations. It's not that difficult actually to become more welcoming. It's just thinking through, how do we every so often indicate if you're gay, you're welcome and we want to help. In a moment, we'll move on to statement number 2.
Thanks to everyone who's come on our training days so far. We're coming to Colchester on the 14th of May, so do join us to explore sexuality in our culture, the biblical picture, and how we can support same-sex attracted Christians in church. Go to livingout.org for more information.
We're working through the Living Out Church Audit, and the second statement really builds on the first. It's a way of making sure that people who are gay, same-sex attracted, really do receive a welcome rather than being rejected. So here is statement 2. derogatory language or stereotyping attitudes towards anyone would not be tolerated either up front or in conversation between church family members. So, Ed, what kind of stuff do we have in mind here? What might be examples of this going wrong?
Well, let's start with derogatory language. I was struck when I was first open and honest about sexuality with Christian friends, how many felt they had to apologise to me for derogatory language they had used about gay people in front of me. And to be honest, I hadn't been massively affected by that, but it was interesting to notice how much that happened, and to notice that part of the culture I grew up in, even within the church, was a culture where you could use derogatory language that was not particularly nice to people from sexual minority groups. That's perhaps a little bit of an understatement. So we just got to say that that's not right. And as Christians who believe that every human being has been created in the image of God, who follow a God who has, put that reality into the heart of humankind, so that we have this thing called human rights. It's a biblical idea. We should be thinking, everybody I come across created in the image of God, and I don't want to use any derogatory language which will diminish them or make them feel diminished in any way, just because I'm wanting to do a bit of banter or crack a joke or whatever it is. So we just need to sort of police that in a gracious way and change cultures and call out bad language, whoever uses it. So I can think of some situations where somebody perhaps of an older generation used some derogatory language that they didn't use to cause offence, but was offensive, and then being called out by someone in church leadership and apologising. And that was obviously a really hard, painful thing for the person calling them out, for the person who said the thing in the first place, but just a beautiful way of really underline the point that we're created in God's image, and we want to crack down on, in a lovely pastoral Christ-like way, behaviour, particularly language that doesn't communicate that.
Great. Let's think a little bit more about stereotyping, because that, it seems to me, is more subtle, but is potentially quite difficult, especially for those who wrestle with gender identity issues. Andrew, I know you've done a little bit of thinking about stereotyping. What sort of things have you got in mind, and why is there an issue with it?
So I guess when we talk about stereotypes, we're talking about those kind of generalizations that are made about particular groups of people, types of people, which then often become unhelpful. And stereotypes often emerge because there's some truth in them. Often they do represent a statistical majority. But then I think what I've come to realise is actually the important thing is keeping stereotypes in their place. They're not inherently always wrong or bad, but it's keeping them in their place. So it's remembering that stereotypes are things that are often true, but not always true. They're generalizations, not universals. And actually the problems emerge when we take what is often true and we assume that it is always true and kind of project that onto people. And then the other way we need to keep stereotypes in their place is by realizing they're descriptive, not prescriptive. So they are observations, not guidelines. And so again, the risk is you move from many people in this situation also reflect this characteristic to actually someone in this situation has to reflect this characteristic. And that again, unhelpfully kind of puts things on, projects things on people. So just kind of remembering what stereotypes really are, they're just these generalizations, they're just descriptive. I think it helps us to be responsible about them.
And so examples would be, I don't know, every man must like sport, every woman must like craft. And if you don't like sport, you're not a real man. And if you don't like craft, you're not a real woman. Presumably that becomes quite an issue when gender dysphoria issues are around.
Definitely, yeah. I think we live in a culture where actually the kind of trans narrative is affirming old stereotypes. If you remove your identity, if your body doesn't dictate whether you're a man or woman, there's not much left to determine what does. And so ultimately it comes down to stereotypes. You get absurd situations like a documentary about trans kids where a dad says, "I knew my son was a girl when I saw them run." You think, goodness, it's diagnosis by stereotypes. There's a way that girls run. That's how this person ran. Therefore, there must actually be a girl. And yeah, I think stereotypes really can aggravate that. And my own experience would be actually that not feeling I fitted into a box of what people thought boys and men were meant to be like made me feel like I was a girl. And there's a point in my childhood I've often talked about where I generally thought inside I must be a girl just because I so didn't fit what people said men are like. But actually coming to realise, no, those things are generally true, but not always. They're observations, not actually instructions. Makes me realise it's okay if I don't fit into those boxes. So definitely it's a huge topic within the kind of trans phenomenon we're experiencing. And a way we could help many people, although it doesn't solve everything, we need to make that clear, is actually to be much more careful with those stereotypes.
And you've had some interesting experience around that, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of would have ticked the tomboy category growing up. So I'm, a girl who likes sports and playing drums and, pool and all this sort of thing. And I don't like crafts or baking or fashion or anything really girly. And I'm okay with that. I mean, actually growing up, I'm quite glad that I grew up in the late 70s and 80s because it seemed to be less of a problem then. But yeah, I've had some interesting experiences with church culture. I remember once I went on a conference and they had a kind of day of fun at the end of the conference, which was supposed to be, like really nice for everybody. And I thought, great, I love fun. The men all got to go go-karting and the women got to stay behind and make candles. And I was just absolutely gutted. I mean, I was in a foul mood all day.
Have you still got the candle?
No, have a heck.
You burnt it down soon afterwards.
Yeah. But I mean, it made me, partly I was missing out on a fun activity, but it also, got at my identity as well. I have struggled to feel that I'm a proper Christian woman because I don't fit all these boxes. And I was quite challenged on that because I think, I'd had a huff about it for quite a lot of years. And, my church did very sort of stereotypical groups and things, but then I just decided, well, I can be part of the solution, actually. I can, do something positive. So I just started a social night playing pool for anybody who likes playing pool, whether they're a man or a woman. And it became a really cool thing where people could invite their friends and just enjoy a bit of Christian community. And, non-Christians could come and join in and everything. But yeah, I find that much healthier than, as Andrew said, the prescriptive stuff.
And I love that, the kind of leading by example thing. Most people you talk to, no one really fits all the stereotypes of a traditional man or woman. And the more and more I talk about this, the more I find people saying, actually, yeah, I don't really feel I fit in the box either. And actually, if we all just lead by example and just been really comfortable with who we are in terms of how we are in terms of our personality preferences and stuff, it's really releasing for people. And one of the most lovely statements someone said to me at my church the last few years, someone who thanked me for showing their son a different way of being a man. This was the night after we'd been at someone's birthday party together, which kind of made me worried about how I'd been at the party. But there we go. I don't know what the son said when he got home. But still, I think it's lovely, actually, that I'm showing guys in my church, you don't have to be a traditional style man, all those stereotypes. You're still a man, even if you like traditionally feminine things. That's okay. So one of the most powerful things we can do as church leaders, just as Christians, is to be comfortable in how we are and the personality preferences God's given us and lead by example in that.
So a real practical outcome would be think of your church youth group and think, actually, could I be a happy member of our church youth group and be a young man who's not into football or be a young woman who's not into craft? And I just think that's quite a piercing question for a lot of us because we think, actually, no, most of our activities for our youth do conform to those quite unhelpful stereotypes. I once ran a youth venture and a mum rang me up and said, my son's thinking about coming on the holiday this summer, but it just sounds very sporty. Is he going to be, he's not a sporty teenager. Is he going to be happy on your activity holiday week? And I was on the phone thinking, oh my goodness, how have I managed myself, the most non-sporty person I know, to end up running this week of a holiday for Christian kids where people are made to think you're only going to be able to thrive if you're a young man or boy who likes sport. But it's we fit into it so often, and we need to perhaps take a step back and think, would people of all sort of different types, all sort of different interests and personalities thrive in our youth group, or would it just work for those who, fit the majority stereotype?
And the reason this matters is because biblically we want people to define their gender by the body that God has given them, rather than whether they fit into any kind of stereotype. That's why this really matters, partly because it's about being biblical, actually, and we can only say you are defined by the body God has given you if that's the approach we actually live out as we arrange activities and so on.
And that is really freeing. Actually, I've just had this really wonderful freeing experience of realizing I'm a man because God says I'm a man. God has given me that identity and spoken it to me in my body, which means my personality and preferences, my deep love for musicals and Downton Abbey, and the fact I would love to make candles and would hate to go goat-karting or paintballing, that's okay. I'm still a man. That's okay, because that's a solid, static identity. And so we want this because it's his biblical faithfulness, but also it's beautifully freeing and releasing for us. It is for our flourishing that God gives that teaching in that direction.
I was going to say as well, this isn't just a sexual minority issue. There are lots of friends of mine who are straight, single or married, who struggle just as much with the gender stereotype thing. So I think it's important. It's not a minority thing, actually. As you say, very few people fit a very neat stereotype.
We're naturally gravitating to gender stereotypes because that's a really important topic and something many of us will be impacted by, we as church want to think about. It's also worth noting that there are lots of stereotypes about gay people. And I really rest on in my personal experience. I, in reality, am quite a stereotypical gay man in a lot of my personalities and preferences. And for a long time, kind of wrestled with, well, actually, if all this is tied up in a sexuality which actually God doesn't affirm me kind of enacting, is that okay? I know I always mention the musicals, but the reality is it okay that I'm a classic gay man, that I love musicals? And actually, again, just realising these things don't define us. They're not actually linked up in anything sinful and stuff. It's been really releasing. And just being able to embrace, the fact that I can be a bit camp and flamboyant sometimes, that really is fine. That's just part of personality. The fact that statistically that's more common among gay men doesn't matter. And so it's also really important that we don't use derogatory stereotypes about gay men and gay women, but actually also every person in the church, regardless of sexuality or anything else, feels free to express their personality. Basically, it is the God-given personality, just feels the comfortable and the freedom to express that and live that out.
And this is important in parenting, because I know Christian parents who are so wanting their child to grow up not being gay and being happy in their body, that they almost that as soon as their young son picks up his younger sister's Barbie doll, they're out in the garden within 5 seconds playing rugby with them, because that's the way to ensure that their son is going to grow up heterosexual and manly. When there's it's ridiculous, but we do a lot of damage by gender stereotyping and stereotyping gay people in really horrible ways, particularly as parents who are the people that most want to love and care for their kids.
Do you think there are any kind of biblical prescriptions on what a man and woman should be like? Because I'm obviously, as a woman, I've been on the receiving end of, should have long hair, should wear skirts, and there are obviously people who think that. But is there any biblical defence of that approach?
My reading of scripture and where I've kind of landed on this tricky question is, I think there are two things the Bible says about how we to live out our identity as men and women. And it's really important to say this is about living out our identity, not creating it. It's not a performance which enacts the facts or makes us a man or woman, actually things that flow from it. One is, I do think the Bible seems to indicate we're meant to present our identity as a man and woman in how we appear externally. As in, you're meant to be visibly observable as either a man or woman. And that's kind of, we get a head start on that in the body, basically. Breasts and beards. Secondary sex characteristics are God's head starter on us being visibly either male or female. And then I think there are biblical indications, Deuteronomy 22, 1 Corinthians 11 particularly, that actually within the parameters as our culture understands it, we should be presenting ourselves externally as male and female. Interestingly, in a culture that's becoming more and more androgynous, that gets more difficult, and there's actually more flexibility in a sense. And another thing would be, some Christians would believe there are different roles for men and women in marriage context and in church leadership context. The leadership side particularly, there'd be more kind of debate over that, but some Christians do, and that's a possible thing that scripture might outline. Beyond that, I can't see anything scripture says as specific for how men or women should live.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I'm conscious we've given you a lot to think about there, but think is probably the right word. We want to encourage churches to think about the fact there may be those same-sex attracted, those experience gender dysphoria. What will church be like for them? Now, in addition to the podcast series, there are other ways we want to help. If you go to the Living Out website, there's a whole section on church. There's a heap of articles and blogs around the theme of church and what it means to be a church that promotes a sense of welcome and dignity. And as a Living Out team, we love going on tour. So if you're a church leader and you would be keen to welcome the Living Out team to your town or city, get a group of churches together, and we will explore these issues for a morning or a day, please do get in touch via the website. We'd love to set up a date where we can come on tour and visit you. In the meantime, do join us for future episodes as we continue to work through the Church Audit. Do like us and subscribe to us so you know when the episodes are dropping. And we look forward to being able to speak to you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks so much for listening.